Good evening. I'm Bern Bernanke, president of the Golf Heritage Society. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight for the beginning of our Grand Zoom series, the Winter Series, new for 2022. We're very excited for the series. It was very successful in 2021. We have a capacity for 100 participants. In the last several, we've had about 50. So we will tell you that if you invite your friends and talk it up, we can accommodate these folks. I'll also ask you to please help an individual who's not sure how to get onto a Zoom call. You know how simple it is. Receive the constant contact invitation, recognize it as such, whether it's email or a phone contact. Simply touch the invitation and boom, you're connected. Your friends may need a little assistance to understand how to turn on audio and video and get the hang of it. So we can all benefit by having more of our members aware and participate. So thanks for helping us out to make more members aware and add to their benefit, just like you enjoy the Grand Zoom series. Okay, thanks for helping us out with that. So now tonight, I'm very excited to introduce Mr. Ron Lucas, PGA. Ron has a fascinating career as a golf professional, master club maker, and a man in the game of golf. Later in Ron's career, he began service activities too, which I'm sure you will be delighted to hear about near to the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Ron Lucas, who will get started and tell you a little bit about the early days, and then I will rejoin and direct the conversation with focused questions for Ron Lucas. Thanks very much.
Bern suggested that possibly, naturally, how did I get into the golf business and where did my history start? So I'll just start with that, saying my father was a World War II vet. He was in the Pacific Theater, 1944 to 46. I was born in 1950. So I'm one of those baby boomers. And in 1952, I had contracted polio. And before the Salk vaccine, which was back in 1954 or 55, I think. And so I had some challenges as a kid growing up, especially when I was on the golf team or trying to get into the game of golf. Both my parents worked. I caddied for my father when he played golf, and so I decided to pick up the game. Unfortunately, when you play the game right-handed, I had the polio all on my left side. So I had some challenges with a very weak side, arm, leg, and today continues, and then a very strong, overpowering right side. So starting in the game was tough. Gym class as a kid growing up and so on and so forth. But I worked through it. I worked out of it. And I got to be caddying over at Latrobe Country Club at a young age. And Deacon Palmer, Arnie's father, he had polio. And he had it in his left leg. So we had a little bit of a connection or a bond. And that created a nice relationship down the road. I became the #1 man on the golf team. I was on there for 4 years, caddied at Latrobe Country Club, won the caddy championship back in 1968, went to college, came back and got into what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And that's where I chose the PGA or a golf career. Started in Latrobe again, but a different golf course called the Latrobe Elks. Back then it was Holiday Acres. And with that in mind, I was up there with a Marty Statler who had a driving range. And I think I got to say, I grew up and was born at the right time in the right area, because golf, we have here Laurel Valley, which had the PGA in 1965, caddied there for Dave Marr back in 1971 in the 2-ball championship. Another club, very exclusive, called Rolling Rock Club. Then we have Latrobe Country Club and Arnold Palmer. And as a kid in 1958, I saw him fly in after his Masters win. So I had so many connections there with the game of golf, and living in this area was very, very special. Not to mention Oakmont, and I attended the 1962 US Open where Arnie lost to Jack. So I thought I wanted to be a golf professional, and I started at the Elks, as I said. Marty Statler, first thing he did when I was a apprentice in the PGA, he made me learn to whip a golf club. And I think that tradition is very, very important. In my PGA career, I highly recommend that at all times, that even though we don't have wooden golf clubs today, that I do think that the whipping or the traditional parts of the game is very important. That's why I chose to be a member of your fine society here, and how I got to meet Bern. Yeah, the front door is open, Bern. Anyways, I was on my way with Marty and started my career in 1972. His brother-in-law was Carl Ross. Carl Ross was also the head salesman for Arnold Palmer Sales back in the 60s. And the Arnold Palmer Golf Club, one of which I have here in my collection. And he says, how would you like to go to work in the Lynx Golf Club factory out in California? And I said, great, nice place to start. So I was on my way west, made it to Tucson, Arizona, $300 in my pocket, and my transmission went in my car. So when I wired home for money, Mom helped me. One of the members at Latrobe Country Club that I caddied for said he's a member down at Ocean Reef. Ocean Reef is down in the Florida Keys, a very, very exclusive club. And he said, would you like to start there? And I said, absolutely. So I did a reverse after I got my car fixed, gave up the Lynx Golf Club factory, and turned around and went to Ocean Reef. Bob Toski was the golf professional there. Very exclusive. Jimmy Dean had his yacht there called Big Bad John, and just met a lot of nice people. And so that started my career on and on and on. So as I went through my career, I moved from Rochester, New York, met a pro. He liked the way I worked, then worked down at Bay Hill. Bay Hill was just starting up in 1972. I went through there on my way to Ocean Reef. Saw that Arnie had taken over that golf course. There was no houses, all orange groves, and it was also the first year of Disney World. So I noticed on TV last week, they're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Disney World. Here I am thinking, I remember that in 1972, so I guess I'm getting older now. And the next year I started at Bay Hill. And really had a good time. I had 9 years of that. Met a golf member who liked my talents and wanted me to start a club repair business in Charlotte, where he was a car dealer and very affluent, knew Arnie real close. And that's how I got to be with him there for 3 years, worked under many people, and learning the wood making craft and craftsmanship, which fit right in. And that's how I got the job at Latrobe Country Club. I did a club repair for them. And Arnie says, who did this? And Cecil Glover was the guy's name. And he says, hey, that's your old caddy, Ron Lucas. He says, Ron Lucas, I didn't know he knew anything about golf clubs. And he said, well, ask him if he'd like to be the head pro at Latrobe Country Club and come back. And Cecil health was going. he sold it to another individual. So it was time for me to move on. And I came back here to Latrobe from as a caddy and playing as the head pro at Latrobe Country Club. And what an honor and surprise that was. And so I was there for 4 years. That's where I met John. And I think you just joined there in what, 79 or 80, I think, John? I think so. Anyways, I got to meet a lot of people. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was to develop and enhance the caddy program. That meant a lot to me, being a former caddy. And as carts were coming into play and the income, the caddy area was so important to get these kids, some of which had some challenge backgrounds and home lives. And we had the best caddy program, I would say, at Latrobe Country Club. There would be people coming in because of Arnie and doing his exhibitions or big tournaments from outside of the Pennsylvania area. And the first thing they said is, wow, these caddies, they're fantastic. And so it was a training, it was a love, and it was an opportunity to give something back to the game. So it spurned from there. And then I went into the club making business. Some of you may have seen my workmanship where I got to have my own business. So, all right, Bernd, you're back.
Yeah, so I am. I'm sitting in your living room. We
Okay.
can't be in the same room. And it's a treat to be in your home in your presence again, Ron. Thanks. So, Ron, I don't know if when I was going through the Squirrel Hill Tunnel, whether you were talking about your relationship with Deacon Palmer. Did you have a chance to talk about how he noticed you early?
Briefly, I said that when I contracted polio and I was on my way to try to recover, that's when I started caddying in '64. And that's when I met up with Deacon and we created that bond or relationship. So I didn't get into too much details other than we had a special connection there.
Pretty cool. So what do you remember about the man, Deacon Palmer?
He was a class individual. He was also the superintendent there. He had worked in the steel mills in the beginning. I think he had something to do with the coal mine in the beginning. So did my father and his parents. So they were from Hostetter. Deacon was out there. So it was a connection that my dad had with Deacon. And then from there, my father went into World War II. Deacon got into Latrobe Country Club through a gentleman called Harry Saxman, who owned Latrobe Steel. And I think that's how Deacon got to be the superintendent. And when we played our matches there at Latrobe High School, he would always be tricking up the golf course. He would water the front parts of the green, and the greens would be firm and fast and hard. So when you thought you'd bounce one up there, it wouldn't work. And if you hit one on the green, it wouldn't work. And he was a real trickster, but he was a class act. I cannot say enough about that man and my memories of him. He also kept Arnie in line, believe it or not.
I'm going to pretend that you and I are sitting together and we're looking at 3 snapshots of Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer, the young, brash fellow that when you first came on the scene, you met him, describe him, and then describe him as he's 10 years a professional, and describe him in his later years where his business interests and his philanthropy and his ambassadorship to the game. Tell us a little bit about those 3 Arnold Palmers, please.
Well, in the beginning, I caddied for Arnie like I did for Deke. And Arnie was a tough guy to caddy for. He had his particular ways. He had always lots of golf clubs. And you would be running down the fairway. He would be in the golf cart, and he would make sure that the clubs were never bouncing together. You would shag for him out on hole number 14. You would shag for him on hole top of number 15, where they did one of the Pennzoil commercials. And he would also shag in front of number 1 tee. and hitting it down the fairway. And you had to be there, you had to be quick. And as a matter of fact, as I got back to be the head pro at Latrobe Country Club, being in that area and Arnie being the king in about 1970s, probably 78, 9, when I first got there, I would be able to get kids out of school. And the caddies would get out of school to caddy for either Arnie or some golf event that he would come in. And that made it unique. And we had some special kids, as John knows, one of which just passed, I found out last month, from that COVID. And it was a great loss because we kept in touch with a lot of those kids. And they were a special bond and crew that to this day stay together and keep in touch. So Arnie was always expecting and wanting, and he was given whatever he needed through the community. And I thought he had the great location, being his office was right across the street. His house was right across the street. Down the road was the airport where he had his flights and planes. And then he had his golf course there. And Latrobe Country Club used to be a 9-hole golf course when it started out. And probably in the early 60s, I think he bought it, and he and Deke designed the back 9 and rearranged some of the holes that it made at 18. And so I would work on some of his clubs. And so when I got him that club and I would work on some of his clubs, we would be there together in his office. I would be in the back room where the workshop is, and he would be in his office doing his business. And one of those stories I thought was kind of unique. I'm working on some of the members clubs, and I'm a pretty particular guy. I call myself the Vincent Van Gogh of golf club repair and refinishing, and he's more of the blacksmith. So he comes back one day, and the face of a wood back in those days, the inserts and everything, that's real particular. And, you know, the bulge, the roll, and how it performs consistently, you got to be good at it. And cutting in scoring lines by hand, you got to be good at it. And you should be using the right tools. Well, I'm there one day working on the clubs, and he comes back and he says, "Hey, Ron, how you doing?" "Good, Mr. Palmer." And he says, "I'm going to be working on some clubs. You're going to be using this machine over here?" And I said, "No, I'll be on the other side." He says, "Good." So he has this Rockwell machine. It's high RPMs. It's a belt sander about 10-inch wide. He turns that machine on, it's winding, and he gets out his driver and he starts working on the face. And all I hear is this grinding. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "You don't like the way I work on clubs, do you?" I said, "Well, Mr. Palmer, to be honest with you, not really." I said, "If you want to have a club and you need something like that, you know, I think I can, do a little better job. I'm a little more particular." And he says, "Yeah, but I like to do this. This is my therapy." So we used to have that little back and forth every now and then. We didn't always see eye to eye, but he was always very respectful of what I did and how I did things. I gave him a little tip one time in that latter part, just briefly. We're on the putting green, and I had a little lesson, and he was going out to play that day. And he's up there, and I'm watching him putt. And you know how we'd always break down his wrists. And typically, you know, when you're talking about some of the fundamentals, you like to keep that target hand kind of firm with the forearm and the backhand, not breaking down so quickly. And I got over there and I said, "Mr. Palmer, you know, how's your putting?" And he says, "Well, you know, I'm working on something." And he was working on these 20-footers. And I says, "Well, I'd like to give you a suggestion." "Yeah, you have a comment?" I said, "Well, you know, just like our wood making thieves, I had a comment." And I said, "You know, if you keep that left wrist from breaking down, I think that may help you." And I would probably also recommend you working on about the 3-footers, not the 20-footers. And he stops me and he says, I got the best golf lesson from the best putter that ever lived. And you guys want to take a guess on who he said the best putter and the best lesson he ever had on putting? And the guy's name is Jerry Barber. Jerry Barber gave Arnie Palmer a putting lesson. He was the best putter according to Arnie. And I said, what? And he says, and Jerry told me if I make all the 20-footers, those 3-footers are going to be easy. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that downhill 3-footer left to right putt is going to be an easy putt.
So now tell us, that's the mid-career Arnold Palmer, who had a lot of confidence, obviously, in his one important lesson. So tell us about how Mr. Palmer changed a little bit in demeanor, if so, when he, settled down on the senior tour and perhaps became more of a ambassador for the game. Did you stay in touch with him, or what would your observations from afar be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can point to is back in the 60s when I caddied for him, back in the 70s when I was the pro there. He had some nice form and balance and smooth tempo and so on until the women came around. And when they came around, everything got a little more aggressive and he wanted to show off for the people. As he got older, and when I was down at Bay Hill and such, he never made that adjustment for the aging process. He never made that adjustment for making some adjustments with his physical characteristics, flexibility, gearing his swing down a little bit, taking an extra club instead of trying to hit the 9-iron as hard as he did when he was in his 40s. So he was always a tough guy. I think his mentor, his guy that really kept him in line was Deacon. Deacon was special. And I remember one time where whatever Arnie did, he did something that Deacon didn't appreciate. They didn't know I was in the back room cleaning clubs. And all I heard was this loud voice from Deacon saying, get down off your high horse. Don't you ever do that again. And I'm going to tell you right now, I never want to see you get that way. You got to remember where you came from. And I think that was the wake-up call for Arnie. And Deacon was always that way.
So I don't think it gets any more intimate than those series of stories. And while you described that Deacon Palmer had a toughness and a versatility to get into the game, and he transferred that to his son, there was a certain warmth of Arnold Palmer as well. You have a couple golf collectibles that you and I talked about. There's one in particular that the three clubs in particular that were owned by Arnold Palmer. Would you pull out that driver and tell that story, please?
You could probably see it better with the photos that I had sent you earlier. But this is a special driver that Arnie gave me to give to my dad because Arnie's birthday, is September 10th. And I had my father do a painting for Arnie. And I gave it to him, and he was very complimentary of it. My father, I felt, was a very good artist. You saw some of his work. And so I thought I'd try to do something special and personalized versus what do you get a guy like Arnold Palmer? And so Arnie was very thankful. And he said about my father's painting, and he says, what can I give him? And I said, well, it would be very nice to possibly give him one of your clubs. And if you could somehow autograph it, that would be fantastic. So he gave me this driver, and the driver on the face of it, let's see if I can just briefly show you. It has here, he signed it to Ehrman, which was my father's name. My father had a very unique first name, Ermin. Best wishes, Arnold Palmer. And that's kind of rare because Arnie did a lot of autographs, but when he got to personalizing something, that was not a typical thing that he liked to do. Your name or something like that personalized was not his usual. And as he got older and as he got into some of his health concerns, I know for a fact somewhere around, he passed away, I think, in 2016. So probably a couple of years, possibly before that, is when he stopped signing his signature, because he was always very, very particular on his signature. It had to be perfect. He practiced it a lot. I know that that was part of his personality, and it would always be sticking that way. And I remember him talking to some of the pros, one of which was Mickelson at the time, and the US Open over here at Oakmont. And he was playing with Mickelson, and I forget who the other, I think it might have been Tiger, I'm not sure. But Mickelson and them, no, I think it was Nicklaus. They walked off the number 18, and they were signing autographs, and Mickelson skipped away from some of the autographs and walked away. And Arnie pulled him aside and said, "Don't you ever do that again. Do you know who signed your paychecks? All of these people around here." And so he was very special about that, and it made a lot of sense. And he says, and when you do your signature, you do it right. I want to make sure that he got that message across. So that was very special of him, and something he always was mindful of.
So Ron, I wanted to ask you two more Arnold Palmer questions. And then we want to talk a little bit more about Latrobe. I don't know if people know this. You say Latrobe when you're not from there. And when you're from there, you say Latrobe.
That's correct.
Latrobe Country Club, home of Arnold Palmer. So how did Arnold Palmer get those big arms?
Oh, well, and he liked, as he said, to tinker with golf clubs. And the grips that he would always want to be playing with are leather grips. So in the leather grips, and when I did some club repair on site for, let's say, the 83 US Open, which I have a story that we can fill in with that. You do a set of golf clubs, leather regripping. If any of you have that in mind, you will have your hand strength and your forearm strength always, because doing a set of those, you start up here and you start to whip and wrap, and you got to be tight, and you got to make sure everything overlaps properly and so on. So I think that's one of his daily exercises would have been regripping a leather grips on his golf clubs, because he'd do it as he was walking down the fairway. It wouldn't be just in his workshop. He would have his golf clubs, the caddy would be there. He'd hand him a club, take it apart, put it back together, try it again, always looking and tweaking and fine tuning, including while he was playing his practice rounds.
So tell us how Arnold Palmer acquired 10,000 putters.
Well, he was a guy, and I have a putter here that they gave me, but that's, again, a kind of a rarity. When he would play, or he would be at a golf club throughout the world, and he'd take a look at whoever he's playing with or somebody nearby, he'd take the putter out of the bag, and he would start giving it the little test drive, and he'd putt a couple and so on. And he says, "Oh, I think I like this." And whoever it was would say, "Mr. Palmer, you go ahead and take that putter, because if you can win another golf tournament, I would love to have you have that." So the next thing you know, Arnie would be taking it. I'd see it in the workshop. He would never use any kind of padded vise. He would, the teeth on the jaws of the vices would be there. He'd get some nice Tommy Armour Silver Scots with the ferrules on there, plastic and everything. He would take it, he'd put it into that vice grip, he'd wrench it down, And I'd be over there just screeching, you know, because it'd take the big hammer and start pounding on it to adjust the lie or the loft. Take it out, and there's all the teeth marks on the hosel. And then it would go out to the golf course. And by the time he got done, it would go back into the bag of 10,000. So they just kept accumulating and accumulating. So, and what was one of his weakest parts of his game as he got a little bit older was his putting. So when you got a guy who has 10,000 putters, you probably can connect the dots.
Very good. Very good. So you had a collectible, and we know that the collectibles sometimes have great value because they're rare and have historic. But you had a couple things in your possession, Ron, that were I thought, very unique. And one of them was a basket that sort of highlighted the Latrobe community. Do you have that on your desk by chance?
Yes. Yep.
Guys, I think this is worth a look. It's very interesting and unique, and it really helps us understand the affinity people in the town of Latrobe have for the town of Latrobe.
Before I show you that, when you said some kind of collectibles or rarity, this is back in the 1950s. He was with Wilson's staff, and that's where he got the liking of the 8802 Wilson putter. But this one is very kind of rare. I don't know if anybody has ever seen. This is actually hand stamped from Wilson. It says Arnold Palmer on the back end of it. And it dates back to 1958 approximately. I thought that is one of a kind, and not too many people have ever seen that. Because, you know, he wasn't with Wilson for a long time, but in the 50s, that's when he was, and then he would get into his own company. That's where Carl Ross and that driver that you saw there came into be in the 60s. My first year was 1978. And again, being that I was born and raised in Latrobe, we had such a unique area. Back in the 50s, it was a town of population of approximately 15,000 that had 85 industries. It was the birthplace of professional football. It was the birthplace of the banana split. It was the only place that had the Rolling Rock beer brewery. And Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers from Latrobe, and so on and so forth. So again, a very special place for many reasons. And so when I got there, I wanted to identify and try to get Arnie with the connection of the history of Latrobe. And so I came up with a sales rep, and we put this together. This was a Caro, C-A-R-O, Nan, N-A-N, design. And I looked her up to see if she was still in business or the company. And this came up on there if you look at it, but it says sold out. Vintage was the 1970s. So this had to be one of the first ones. It's woven wooden, but I got Arnie to sign and we took the paper of his signature, the umbrella, and the Rolling Rock brewery. And then on the sides, there's a lot of the buildings that are all hand painted and stated about the different parts of Latrobe that mean something to the town. So I kept this, I gave it to my mother, and I thought, gee, you know, when we had spoken last week, I thought this would be something to share, and it's never been used. And it's, I think, another one of those rarities, especially since Arnie's no longer with us and the signature. I thought it was always important to identify what Latrobe was all about and how it came to be. The coal miners, the steel industry, the 85 industries, and a lot of them were members at Latrobe Country Club when I caddied there. I have one little story about that. Arnie's also a guy that always wanted to be number one. Nobody should outdo him. I don't think anybody would argue that. So there was a coal mining guy, real nice guy, and he had a helicopter. And so he lived in Somerset where the coal mines are. And he would call me up and he says, because he was a new member, hey, Ron, how about taking care of it? I'm going to be flying in. I'm running a little late. Make sure nobody's on number 18. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. I got my helicopter. I said, oh, okay. So Arnie happened to be in town then, and he was down in the men's grill, I think. And here comes the helicopter, and I alert everybody, and it's coming in, and he says, Ron, who the hell is that? What's going on here? And I said, oh, that's Mr. Don Soberdash. He's coming in. He's playing golf today. He said, he's coming in with a helicopter? I said, yes, sir. Everything's cool. It's okay. He said, okay. Well, guess what? Arnie isn't going to get undone. Do you think so? So how would he get to Oakmont in the future? He had to get his own helicopter and do transportation back and forth to Oakmont and skip those parkways and the Squirrel Hill Tunnel and all that traffic. So I'll never forget that day that he says, who the hell is that? Somebody outdid him.
Another intimate story, the competitive nature of Arnold Palmer. So
yes,
as we were speaking earlier in the week, Ron, you talked a little bit about rubbing elbows with a lot of the pros in the classics era. And I, you worked with some, you might have caddied for some earlier in your career, but I think you did some club building too. So could you tell us a little bit about who you met and who was who, and who was nice and who was naughty?
Well, I can tell you there's two different sides to everybody, and some people that you would see on TV that you would think are kind of arrogant and snooty and stuck up. Behind the scenes, they were class, they were very nice and very professional and did whatever, to compliment you, including paying the bill on time. Then there were some other ones that you thought, oh, this guy, oh, he's a lot of fun. He's really down to earth and all that. Wasn't the same behind the scenes. And I can tell you that when I worked down at Bay Hill, it used to be the Citrus Classic over there on the other side of Orlando. And then Arnie got it to come to Bay Hill. And so in 78, my first year and my first winter down there, I was going to do the on-site club repair. So we had it set up in the basement of that. And the pros came in. And back then, 78, 79, 80, there wasn't the big vans and that would go along with the Titleist and the Callaways and the True Tempers. If you were good and you were local, that was the way to do it. So I had the honor of hosting it for the 2 years that I was down there during the Classic. And so the one time I'm working on Ben Crenshaw's putter. And I'm down in there and it was a long day. And I also worked on Hale Irwin, Jim Simons, who was from the local Pittsburgh area, Butler, and Tom Watson, and so on. And I met a lot of those guys, and some of which were, they needed club repair. So I'm down there and it's getting late. And here comes the security guard, which I did not know. And I'm working on Ben Crenshaw's putter. And as I finish up and I try to get out, I'm locked in. And I got no place to go. And I don't have it. Back then, you didn't have cell phones and all that stuff. So there wasn't a phone down there. And overnight, I had to stay in the workshop because I couldn't get out and working on their clubs. Now, that's dedication, isn't it? Lee Trevino was one of those guys. How many times you see Lee Trevino and you say the Merry Mex and all that stuff? He wasn't that same guy behind the scenes. He wouldn't permit me to work on his club. He wanted to use all my tools. He wanted to use the vise. He wanted everything handed to him, but you stay out of that. Don't you touch my club. Then there's a guy, David Graham. Now, David Graham was a guy that had a reputation, which I didn't know about, but if you, I don't know when it was. I think it was after I worked on his clubs, maybe in the 80s. Bobby Clampett, he was doing some color for some of the golf tournaments. And Bobby brought up one day about how he was shagging balls for David Graham. And he was in San Diego. And after the shagging was done, David skips town, never pays him. And so when he saw him on that tournament that day, he says, "You remember me?" And he was interviewing, and he reminded him of why he should have known him. So I do a lot of work for David Graham. And he says, "I'll pay you at the end. I'll pay you at the end. I'll pay you at the end." So he has about 5 invoices. And for me, it was a lot of money, you know, for what I was doing. And I'm up there and I'm waiting for him. And the tournament's done. It's Monday the week, and they're going to be heading on down the highway. I'm in there with the golf shop, and Mr. Palmer's office was right there, full glass. And I'm looking out the window. David Graham comes in, talks to Arnie a little bit, goes out the back door and gets in his car and starts driving off the parking lot. And so I said to Mr. Palmer, "Mr. Palmer, I don't mean to get you involved, but here's what happened." And he says, "He didn't pay you? That son of a..." And he says, "Just a minute." So he gives him a call. And he didn't get more than a block away at Bay Hill, and he had to turn around and come back and pay me. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot all about that." And I said, "Yeah, right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Graham." And then I find out through Bobby Clampett, I'm sure he and I were probably one of many.
So I'll tell you something, Ron. Your stories are intimate and fun, and it's fun to hear about these good guys, especially. We had met Lee Trevino at the National Hickory Championship at Oakhurst, and he came up and he spent the day with us, and he could not have been more fun. But we weren't trying to touch his clubs; he was trying to touch our hickory clubs, and he had a blast doing it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, maybe like wine, he's mellowed out. I got him back in the 70s, and he wasn't the same.
I get it. So I'm really hoping that you will share with us that U.S. Open story when you were at Oakmont and you were there as support club repair and maintenance. I thought that was a fabulous story. Can you take us there?
Sure. Well, you know, I was the pro at Latrobe Country Club until about 1981, so 4 years. And after that, I connected with a few guys that saw my talent and wanted to start a club repair business in Aspinwall in Pittsburgh. So I moved down there, and Aspinwall's not too far from Oakmont. And in '83, the U.S. Open was coming. And again, they didn't have the big trailers and such. So being that I did some work for Oakmont Country Club members, and Bob Ford knew me from Latrobe Country Club, the way I got on there was different than anything today. Today, I couldn't get there, but back then, you were having some people talk for you. So I met Tom Meeks of the USGA and a few others. They saw my work. They said, "No problem. You can, you know, get your trailer set up, whatever you wanted." So I had a perfect spot. It was right off of 18, about where they would hit their drives. And back then, the driving range was right by the parking lot there and 18. So it was a perfect prime spot. And I'm there for a little over the week with the setup. Got to meet Greg Norman before he was really Greg Norman. And here he is coming in, wanting all his clubs reshafted, which I did. And then when I handed him the invoice, he says, "What's this?" And I said, "Well, that's for the work I did." And he says, "Don't you know who I am?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't pay my bills. Sorry." And so he never came back. And then there was another guy named Forrest Fessler. And I think most of you have heard Forrest's name. He was a rebel. And he was one of those guys that treated me 100% professional and good. So started off the week, leather gripping, doing some other face work, so on. He says, I like your work. I'll tell you, you know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. Are you going to be here all week? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, if I make the cut, I'm going to ask a favor of you. And I said, certainly, no problem. We'll keep in touch. Anything you need during the week. So then there was a rain delay, storm delay during the weekday. I gave you some pictures where we had a full trailer of people because of the lightning awareness. And they come in, and here's Arnie coming into my trailer. And he's looking at the clubs, and they did a little newspaper thing, and a lot of people got their picture taken with him, and it was something special. So as I was working on Forrest Fessler's, he wore shorts. And that's a no-no with the USGA and especially the US Open. So I had a picture, which I showed you, of me working on his club during the practice round. So I didn't know what was going on, but here it is. It's Sunday. He makes the cut. He says before he teed off that day, you're going to be here all day. Yes, sir. No problem. He said, so when I come around, I'm going to, check in with you. I said, okay. So he plays his 17 and a half holes, hits his drive, swings underneath the rope, he and his caddy, bringing the bag, coming to my trailer right off of 18. And he says, I need to get in there. I said, sure, no problem. You need some clubs or anything? Whatever. No. So I take him in my trailer. He says, shut the door and lock it. I said, okay. So, which I do. This is Sunday now. Golf tournament, final round. Here he is. His caddy pulls out this pair of Bermuda shorts from his bag, and he puts them on. The other pants go into the bag. He says, thank you very much. I think you're going to like what I'm going to do. And so he goes from my trailer, goes underneath the ropes, walks to his ball that's in the middle of the fairway. Television's on, USGA officials are down there, and he walks out there with his Bermuda shorts and causes all kinds of commotion. Now, I see his obituary a couple of years ago, like through Golf World, and it was talking about Hubert Green dying and his reputation and so on and so forth. I'm just browsing through, and lo and behold, here's Forrest Fessler. And his obituary in the golf world was, he was a rebel. He was this, best known for his 1983 US Open and wearing his Bermuda shorts. And I don't think anybody knew, well, I know I didn't advertise that until probably today, other than a select crew. But I
thought, the secret's out, yeah. Like they say, you just had to be there.
Yeah, that's right. So he was a great guy.
There's a story that really no one else knows until they come on to a grand Zoom with the Golf Heritage Society and hear from Ron Lucas. So that's terrific. Hey, Ron, I know that you're not on the senior tour, and you're probably still involved in the game of golf in a lot of ways. And I wanted to pivot and ask you to share with us what turns you on now with some of the volunteer activities that you do.
Well, I have, I'm the executive director for a group called the Pittsburgh Youth Golf Foundation, similar to your First Tee, although we've been in existence since 1990. And we had our 1991, excuse me, we had our 30th anniversary last year. We work with the Pittsburgh Public Schools, the inner city. We paired up with the First Tee a few years ago. And part of our introduction was the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I also worked with a group called the City Connection. City Connection is 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-old who typically have autism. Some of them have spina bifida, they have Down syndrome, they have a lot of challenges. So when they're out of the high school, but they're not out of the Pittsburgh public school systems, there are activities like that. And we got them into the game of golf. And it was such a rewarding experience. The same thing that I'm going to tell you, the one putt. This girl, her name was Sabrina, blank face, stare, no personality. They didn't think she would fit in the golf game, wasn't real friendly with other kids and so on. So I said, let's give it a try. And here we are. We like to have a little competition. We're at the RMU Dome, and I get something set up, and lo and behold, she makes this one long putt. And she lets out this laugh and scream, and she was just elated. And they all wanted to know who was yelling and laughing. And I said, that was Sabrina, and no one could believe it. And it was a one putt. It went to the wrong hole, I understand it, but it went in a hole, but she was hooked on golf. So we had people donating things. So the next week she had to have her pair of shoes. And the next week she had to have her outfit. And she's been with us a long time since then. And so I'm trying to take these kids who we worked with. Unfortunately, when they turn 21 to 22, they are left alone. There's nothing for them, which I think is sad. You get them hooked on it, and then all of a sudden, nothing. So I'm trying to work this program. I tried last year, but the COVID put a damper to that. So I'm trying again this year. I call it Plus 21 because that's what they are. They're over 21, they turn 22 and older. And trying to get that to get together with them, to keep them in the game of golf, keep them active and enthusiastic with other activities other than just staying at home or working. And that leads me into my veterans. I work very closely with the veterans, a group with the PGA called the PGA Hope. Hope stands for Helping Our Patriots Everywhere. But I started this back in 1990 with a group down in Harrisonburg, Virginia, Mid-Atlantic PGA section. It was with the International Amputees Golf Tournament. And they were sight to see. You know, some of them were cancer victims, some were automobile accidents, some were military, landmines, and so on. And it really opened my eyes up of what we can do. And it also was followed up with the American Disabilities Act. So in 2011, I worked with Penn State University, another certification that I got. And it was working with veterans who have challenges, and a group out of Philadelphia, Baltimore, Bethesda Hospital. And that was a very good 2-day experience. And I like to share this part. I'm sure all of you see on TV and all of you hear about PTSD. Yes? Okay. Well, day one was the book smarts. Day two, we're going to take them out and work with them individually. And some of these vets go through 60, 70, 80, 90 operations on one person. Now, you know the anxiety and stress of one operation. How about times 60, 70, 80, 90 times? So they're talking up there, and day two was some brain injuries. And they said the powers to be, the educator ones from Penn State University, and we're going to talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, this colonel, black guy, he had pins in his neck, braces and rods in his back, He was injured. He had those 60, 70 operations. He jumps up, and I'll keep it very clean, but he was not. He was very vocal, and he says, don't you ever call it PTSD. It's not a disorder. You want to call it post-traumatic stress. You want to call it post-traumatic stress syndrome. So be it. But you leave the D off of there, and don't ever think it's a disorder, because that's not what we have. And that stuck with me since 2011, and it was great. We have Solar Rider carts. And then 2016, I had another education. So giving back to the game, working with veterans. One brief story about a 97-year-old veteran, World War II, Pacific Theater, never played golf before in his life. Said, okay, I'll come up because of my buddy in my room said to try it. I don't know why I'm here. Well, the next thing you know, he makes that one putt. I got to get him a golf ball so he can put it on his wheelchair. I got to get him a cap so he's in uniform. He has perfect attendance. And it was another one of those, feel-good stories that you touch somebody's life. And unfortunately, being a World War II vet, there's not many left, and he's no longer with us. But those are special memories and stories that I can share and giving back to the game.
Didn't that gentleman present you with a special thank you award, a ceramic?
Yes, he did. He, they do things on their own, especially when we're in our off season. And I'm supposedly going to be going on site of the hospital, the Southwest Veterans Center, which is Pennsylvania state run. And they are in lockdown right now, unfortunately, because of some positive tests. But they have an art class, an art room, and this guy really enjoyed also doing ceramics. And his like was dragons, believe it or not. And so here I am giving him something, and here he makes me this, ceramic right there. And he hand painted it, and he signed it at the bottom. And it's, again, something in my living room that is cherished and will always be one of those memories that I gave something to him, he gave something back, just like Arnie and the driver and stuff. The game of golf and what it can really do for relationships and friendships. Before you go, Bern, and since you're in the living room, there's a couple of paintings my father did you may want to share. That one that looked like Pebble Beach, for example. B-17 down below. That's what I've done. I did several of those for World War II vets. That's where I get some of my golf club techniques and talents.
Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. So obviously you're very connected and engaged with the service community, and we thank you for that service, Ron Lucas. Very
All
good.
Right.
Better
Okay.
light.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Comments?
I would like Bill Robertson here. I'd like to ask a question. About maybe 15 years ago, the interest in collecting classic clubs fell right off the map. There used to be a tremendous amount of classics being collected. Nothing looks nicer than a set of 4 woods in a room, all pristine. They're just beautiful. And we're so caught up in the hickories, but there's not a supply of them that's going to go on forever. And I think there's got to be a way to get younger people in their 30s and 40s and early 50s interested in what we're about, but maybe we could use the classics as a mean to get them involved, because that would be their thought process. That was their grandfather's club, was a classic. It wasn't a hickory. They don't know from that.
Yeah.
And with you being so strong in that, I just like to hear your opinion.
Oh, I agree with you. And there's some stories like Ricky Fowler on tour. And when he would practice and work with his coach, he would work with a persimmon golf club. He would want to play the drivers, the 3 woods, the 5 woods. Why? Because you'll get your feedback if you miss hit. You'll know that you need to work on some parts of your game. So it's very important to have that feedback. And forgiveness and equipment, I'm not a fan of today. They're nothing but component parts assembled together. I can tell you that I was part of that back in the, I would say, the 80s and the 90s when that was at a premiere. There were a lot of Japanese that would come into like Oakmont Country Club. They would come to my shop. They wanted to buy my Tommy Armour Silver Scotts and Tony Penna McGregors and Ben Hogan McGregors. And I still have, I'm not going to exaggerate. And you come out and I'll show you. I literally have thousands of those because of my collection for many, many decades. And I said to Bern, I would like to pass that on because I'm not getting any younger. I don't have anybody in my life that I would give that to. And they're in storage, they're in boxes, and they need to be shown a little bit more. Some are have never been touched, and some I have restored. And I can tell you I'm very particular when I restore something. I try to keep it as original as possible, protecting it from the wear and tear, and you can play with them. But the golf clubs and the persimmon and the laminated and the inserts and the sole plates and whipping and trying to take a head off of a shaft, that is an art or a craft, and you better know what you're doing. And that's one of the reasons why they're not out there today, because people like myself are a dinosaur. You can't just work on those things. It's too time consuming. We live in a disposable society. We don't have time. I work with a guy named Dick Ford. Ford Paint Company was out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I studied with him. I did some consulting with McGregor back in the days, Hillerich and Bradsby, the Power Built Company, Louisville Golf, and also the Palmer Peerless Pro Group in Chattanooga, because I was such a perfectionist and the way the Ford system works, you've got to know what you're doing. Polyurethanes are nothing to fool around with. Spraying, you shouldn't be dipping. You got to control the amount of material that's on there. 4 thin coats are better than 2 thick coats, and so on and so forth. Then you got to take them apart before you finish them. Repairing dry rotted wood, I can go on and on and on, but it's a lost art. And I think that's also why you don't see a lot of those today, and people don't appreciate. And why I say, if I'm an apprentice in the PGA, the first thing I would do is tell my staff, you got to learn how to whip a golf club. You got to know about how it goes together, because they copy a lot of that stuff today in the metals and the irons. But to actually work on it and see what goes into making a golf club like the good old days, they need to appreciate it more and not give up that tradition of the game of golf.
So, Ron, I'm going to make 2 asks of you. When John R. and the Amigos and myself and Bob Muir pull off a return to Latrobe Country Club, we're hopeful of using the Grand Ballroom a little differently this time, and maybe setting up a golf trade show of some sort. And because the hotel does not have a ballroom that we can use, but the Latrobe Country Club does. I think it will be really cool to ask you to assemble some highlights from your classic club collection. And maybe we'll do a round 2 to have you talk about the where, who, what, and wheres of classic clubs, and do another Zoom sometime. But I think coming out to Latrobe, we could do that. And we'll be in Indianapolis. It's a hop, skip, and a jump on Route 70 over there to Indianapolis. And maybe we can talk you into doing a little presentation as one of our programs, talking about club making then and the collectibles of that era. I think we could build a little programming about that. Would you be interested?
Sure. You'd need a big tractor trailer truck, though, if you want to bring my clubs.
Not all of them, Ron. Just some.
Whether it's Latrobe or Indianapolis, it would be that way.
Hey, and what can you tell us about those golf balls? I promised that we would ask you this question. Those golf balls from Johnny Bola.
Yes. I sent you a newspaper clipping that was dated into June, I think, 5th of 1951. And it was from the U.S. Open qualifier that was staged locally. And I went down and I saw some of the names that were there, and I was amazed. You have names on there like Johnny Bola, and he worked out of Westmoreland Country Club. And those balls were made with J.C. Higgins, and that was a Sears Roebuck type of product, and that's where they would have been marketed. And naturally, you've got the Lou Worsham, his brother Walt. There was a Hall of Famer Ted Luther, but you had Lionel Airbear also at Westmoreland Country Club. And you had Dow Finsterwald playing there as an amateur. I got to meet Dow through Arnie, and I spent some time out there in Colorado with the Broadmoor. Really a nice guy. But I thought it was so unique to see how we had so many golfers in this area. Bobby Cruikshank was also, he was at Chartiers Country Club. And I don't know, it's just amazing to me that we had such a wealth of talent. I think some of the reason was because you didn't have a lot of golf courses where they could go work. And prior to 1972, when I turned pro, I had to go through all kinds of education and service credits and interviews and 40 credits to have an as apprentice. Back then in 1970 or 71, right before I turned pro, you could be a golf pro, period. You know, you'd play for money, but you didn't have the education and the certifications that changed in 72. So they have more today than they ever have. One of which is about club repair, Bill, but I can tell you not the same as when I went through or what I would put them through.
So do you feel that the PGA golf professionals get adequate training and preparation on golf history and appreciation for those that come before them?
No, sir. No, it's a business. The bottom line, it's a business. They usually are now, you know, sharing both duties. You're a head pro and a general manager. And if you think you're going to be a good player, you're not going to have that job very long unless you have a club that has a lot of money that they'll staff your golf shop. But people who have a lot of that money and are members also expect you to take them out for a lesson to play with. And if they want a starting time, they want you to answer the phone. And so that's not the business today. And to be at a club as a golf professional for 20, 30 years is kind of rare. And I don't think that they're preparing them for what we used to be, because it was a different business back in the 70s, 80s than it is today, where everything is money and business.
Will I get people angry if I did have another question?
Not at all. No.
I had one too.
Okay.
Great.
Mr. Lucas, thank you for doing this. I wanted to know, you know, Mr. Palmer had such a public relationship with Jack Nicklaus that I was wondering what you would say. Like what did you observe about the two being together? Like, how do you see the relationship? And did Mr. Palmer ever talk about where he felt he ranked among the all-time greats? Did he ever make mention of that, like where he felt he was?
I know Arnie was very proud and very, very competitive. And when Nicklaus sort of took over back in '62 when Nicholas beat him in the Open, and I was part of that. We called him Fat Jack. We didn't like it. Anybody local here, you didn't dethrone the king. And it was sour grapes for sure. When I worked down at Bay Hill, again, behind the scenes, you see something different. And when you work with somebody, you see a different personality or how things are. Well, you know, Nicholas had his tournament. Arnie had his tournament. And you're supposed to be sharing. You're supposed to come to Jack's, and Jack's supposed to be coming to yours. And there were some times that Jack did not come to Arnie's, what we called it Bay Hill Classic. And that didn't go over well with Mr. Palmer. He didn't like that at all. And they had some, you know, challenges behind the scenes. But I think as age came around, they both saw that they were sharing the limelight, and they should have in the history of the game. So especially I visited Augusta National and the Masters 6 times, and that par 3 has always been very special. And that's when they typically would have played together, other than the you know, historic first tee. And that was always good. You could see that eventually they had to swallow the pill because of time marches on. But in their days, they were very, very competitive. I'll just leave it that way. And you better do something for me or I'll do something for you. Otherwise, you're on that list, and you don't want to be on the list. But I think Arnie thought in his heyday, he was the best. And he proved it in many ways. But time marches on, time catches up with us. The game of golf is a humbling game. And eventually we have to, you know, step aside. And then Nicholas came over and he did his thing. Ben Crenshaw, you know, had a later year to win the Masters. I pulled up one time down at Augusta. I think it was in 1977 when Watson and Nicholas were just teeing off. They permitted us to park in that front entrance there because we were just there late. And lo and behold, here's Nicholas and Watson walking off the first tee. And that was history being made. And Watson beat him that day, I think, by 2 strokes. So they all got their highlights, and they were also had to share the humbling part of the game and get beat.
Thank you.
Somebody else?
Ron, this is Bob Geddes. Thank you so much for tonight. You talked about Mr. Palmer's putting. Do you recall the time period when he was trying white-faced putters? Does that ring a bell at all?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Can you explain maybe why he tried that? And also, in some of the preview information that you sent us, there was a mention about your patented putter. Can you talk briefly about that as well?
Yes. Again, working with handicapped people, the veterans and such, and working with a lot of golf clubs. I think before my time, when I made my, what I call MAP putter, MAP, multiple adjustable putter. It's a putter that has 244 options. It can be different lengths, different styles, different face progressions, different lofts, adjustable weights, adjustable lie, a right-handed, a left-handed, all into one putter. Different insert materials, and the weights can be adjusted and so on. I visited USGA twice, and handicapped people could be using it like what I would have to do for my wheelchair guys. I would have to bend the shaft. This actually bends so it could be stroked from a wheelchair. So I saw a lot of valid points to it. I was the only one out there that had multiple adjustability to it. You could use it for teaching. You could use it for club fitting. You could use it for the handicapped people. You could use it for a lot of reasons. The Tour Pro and so on. The problem was I got my patent finally approved in 2008, January 2008. Refresh your memory. What happened in January 2008? The stock market crashed, and so did my hopes. And trying to find some investors and so on was not going to happen. Then I ran out of money, and my 2 visits to the USGA was very enlightening. I sit in front of this group of people that have my life in their hands. They're engineers, they're architects, they're rule aficionados, and they're telling me how somebody might be able to cheat with it. Now, I'm doing a prototype putter where machinists and engineers and people who do the blueprints want to know how to put it together, how we can make it work. They want to know, the USGA wants to know how somebody can cheat with it. And I said, well, there's cheaters, but you know, here's how we put it together. It all works within the guidelines of the USGA. And they said, yeah, but maybe. And then they would send it back. And I would go to that machinist, and they said, well, how'd they like it? Well, we got to change this, we got to change that. And machinists, they do their CNC machines, and they want to make 500 pieces. My putter requires a lot of pieces to make it work, those 244 options. And so they didn't like that part of it. And when you get into blueprints and having those individuals together, it got to be just, it wasn't gonna happen yet. So I have the 3 prototypes. I have all the experiences. The 2 visits were enlightening, but it still sits in my basement and such.
So, Ron, we have a picture of it and the brochure. I cannot share from my photos, but the host can. So George is standing by, and we're going to see if we can't do another GHS first using technology. From old guys for old guys. There it is. And George, you have a couple more pictures. There was a couple of them with the 3 putters together, put together. That was cool. And then a little look at the brochure.
Yeah, if you look at these 3 or 2 with the in the center, see the not just the lengths are adjustable, the style. So one putter grip could be put onto the shaft, and it would range from 32 to 36 inches, which is a standard putter. Then you could take that grip off, add another grip, which would then make it go to a belly putter. So it would change then to 38 inches to 42 inches. And then if you wanted to take that off, you could take that off and put an extra long putter, which would range from 48 to 52 inches. Now, when you do that, you got to adjust the lie. And then the face progression, I don't think any manufacturers out there are doing face progression. So how the ball comes off, where do you do a little forward press with your hands, so on and so forth, so you can make good contact. That's all into that putter design, or how I wanted to get it going. So I thought I could sell it maybe to Titleist or Callaway or TaylorMade. The problem is lawsuits, the lawyers, and they have them on retainer down in the patent office. And they wouldn't see me, and the sales reps wouldn't see me, because there would always be a problem in court from the guys like myself who get something together, and then they take a look at it, and then they go ahead and copy it and do something just a little bit different. And now your patent is being infringed upon, but they won't. And it's a big guy, little guy type of thing.
Ron, that picture suggests that maybe this putter could be used side saddle. Was that something you considered?
Yeah, you could do anything with this thing because of all the options or the adjustability. So however you want to do it can be worked into your adjustments. You know, the tools were there. I redesigned some of the way you would have a tool because it had to be more of an inside, you know, the tool would be the male, the weights or the putter would be the female, so that no one could touch it and move it during the course of the round or use a wrench or a pair of pliers. So I had to keep all of those things, and I kept on developing and kept on developing. That probably was about a 3-year grouping, and a lot of money to the guys who were doing the blueprints, because a machinist won't do anything without a blueprint. I can't talk to him and just draw it up on a piece of paper. He needs to see everything exact. And then he wants to do it in the CNC machine. And I say, no, not until I get the okay from the USGA, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. 2008 was the last because of the crash. And here we are, 2022. And then I think it's still a great idea, but now look how many adjustable things you have in golf clubs today. You can change your shafts, you can change your weights, you can do this. Face progression hasn't been attached yet. The inserts can be adjusted along with the other adjustability. So that's my little brochure I put together. And again, I came up with a map putter, map your way to a better score, map your way to better putting, because it's a multiple adjustable putter.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay. You had the other question.
It was about Arnold Palmer's white face.
Oh yeah, the white. It came about because he's a tinkerer. Now, if you look at this club here, but you see in the heel, back here in the heel where the whipping is, the heel of the golf club. If that was me, I would say he's going into the neck. You don't face a golf club that way. And if you see the top of the insert, now he would use a black spray paint can, and instead of masking off and things like I would do. But the heel should never be really worked into when you're facing a golf club. You try to stay away from that. So your bulge and roll, your curvature, you try to give yourself more. So that is just another example of how he would be grinding on his belt sanders instead of doing it by hand, where you can be a little bit more cautious of how you take that and work it. Now the white putter came about because his eyes were going bad. He had contact lenses. I hooked him up with a group out of Washington, D.C., Rockville, Maryland. Real nice guy. He was into horse races. His name was Bob Manfuso, and Four Brothers was the stable. Preakness was their home. And they had a place up here at Hidden Valley. I invited him to Latrobe Country Club, met him down at Bay Hill, invited him over. He took care of my contact lenses, and then I got him hooked up with Arnie. Arnie was in his robe. He was sitting by the pool in his backyard, and he's meeting up with the guy. So it was kind of a unique setting, but it was because of his eyesight, and it started to fail. And so the white putter, again, a spray can't paint, is going to be his way of putting it on there. And he would always be tinkering. So I think that was the main thing. As we get older, we don't always get our eyesight keener. And he wasn't going to wear glasses. Anybody else? Anything else?
Ron, it's great to catch up with you after all these decades. And I told the folks a little earlier that you do a great job. You sure did. We're so happy to have you part of the GHS, and we'll get together sometime soon.
All right, that sounds very good. And I said this has been a long time. When I saw John Rusbos, and I says, I wonder if that's the same furniture guy I met back in 1979 or 80, or when you first came on board. And then when our caddy passed away last month, that was a shock because I wanted to let them know that we were going to be doing something like this, and the connection to the caddy program, the Latrobe Country Club environment, just a group of kids that I was able to help steer. They met some people that they were able to get good jobs. They made some money. They made some good friendships, good people that they are successful today. And I think it was all because of the caddy program and Latrobe Country Club and the special it made. We had a caddy tournament. They don't have that anymore. Carts are now the revenue. I don't know how many caddies you have on board at Latrobe Country Club, but we would always be there when I was caddying in the back playing pinochle. That was the game, the card game, pinochle. And then I would go to Rochester, New York, or down in Charlotte, and I had some time in the evenings or on the weekends, and I'd say, hey, let's play a game of pinochle. They never heard of that game. They don't know anything about pinochle. So it must be one of them Southwestern PA games.
Hey, Ron, you did have a tremendous caddy crew, and it was just exciting. They just did a good job. And I know you always believed in helping youth get involved in golf. So just great to see it. You've done it for your whole career. Congratulations.
Well, yeah, appreciate it. There was one little, just a brief story about the caddy program. I didn't want bag toters, so we trained them. And I'd have the other caddies like John Clintock, take them out and we train them. So there wouldn't be any conflicts with the golfer. They were ready, then that's when they would go out. Well, if there would be a problem with somebody not giving a tip when they're done, the caddy was instructed to come to me. And they would say, hey, Ron, Mr. Lucas, I didn't get a tip. And I would say, okay. I would go into the men's grill and I would search out that individual. I'd take them individually off to the side, no embarrassments, but I would say to him, so how was your caddy today? Oh, he was good. I said, did he work good for you? Did he know the yardages, reading putts? Did he have, that were efficient, tending the pin, raking traps, you name it? Oh, yeah, they were very good. I said, well, we like to have tips and gratuity given to the caddies. I said, you're more than happy to give it to them, or you can give it to me and I'll take care of it. Because I had to put a stop to any bad caddies. Now, if the caddy was not good, then I would take that message back to the caddy and say, no tip. You're not going to get a tip unless you earn it. And that was standard operating procedures and the way it should always be. So a lot of golf pros wouldn't have taken that time or effort. They wouldn't have risked that situation. I was very diplomatic, but I was also on the side of the caddy because we had so much compliments and so many comments that we were the best. And they came in from California, and it was funny. They would come in and they'd look at our scorecard, John, and look at 6,400 yards, Latrobe Country Club. Boy, we're going to eat this game up. They'd come in after that, and he might have been a 3-4 handicap at Pebble Beach, and he comes in and he shoots 85 or 95. And he says, I don't know how that happened. I'm going out tomorrow. And I said, see, that's 6,400 yards. It's just because it's a par 4 or par 5. You got to know your club selection. Got to keep it in play. Those greens are not easy, and so on and so forth. So we brought a lot of people to appreciate Latrobe Country Club and golf course and caddy program, the like. It was special.
When we were there this fall, we understood how Mr. Palmer came upon his greatness and his great game, because that course was challenging, very much so.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron Lucas, you have just a little bit of an edge. You want it done a certain way. Did you get that edge from Deacon or Arnold?
Deacon, without a doubt. Deacon Palmer. He was the class. He was the best.
That's amazing. Hey, I have one more question.
Speaking about Arnie and his golf design, growing up in Latrobe Country Club, and you guys have played it, typically you got to work the ball, and a fade is better at Latrobe Country Club than the draw or the hook. Hole number 3 is a good example for you all that have played it. and trouble down on the left-hand side. But you go to Myrtle Beach and see some of his designs down there with Ed C. And what do you see? A lot of right to lefts, right to lefts, right to left. What was Arnie? He wasn't a fader of the ball. He was a drawer of the ball. And it's because he didn't make some of those adjustments. So I thought I'd just throw that in because of his design.
And so, Ron, I have what might be my final question. Since I'm in your living room, is there beer in the refrigerator?
Unfortunately, I drank the last one yesterday. So but it would have been a Rolling Rock, I'll tell you that much. A little green bottle.
Delight. We can't thank you enough. We look forward to more of this, be it in Latrobe, be it in Indianapolis, or getting together at one of our other events. So, the round of applause for Ron Lucas. Everybody's clapping at home. And I'm clapping down in your living room, brother.
Well, thank you for having me and being patient. We had a little technology that had to get figured out. Bob, you took care of that. And I thank you. I don't know what happened from our trial run this morning to this evening, but that's okay. You got it worked out and it worked.
I want to thank Bob Geddes for the announcements and the advertisement. And I want to thank George Petro for setting up the Zoom for us and being our production manager behind the scenes, So you guys are a good team. And it was a lot of fun tonight. So I certainly enjoyed it. And I'm sure everybody else did, because here we are at this late hour and we still had 31 people on the line. So I think our maximum was close to 50, 48 I saw. So it was a great time. Thank you, Ron.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to introduce a little bit of the memories of Latrobe Country Club.
That was a real treat. Thanks very much.
All right. Good night, everybody, and all the best in 2022.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Hooray, Ron. Way to go. Great job.
No problem. There we go.
Okay.
All yours, Ron. Is Bern around?
I haven't seen him yet. He said he was on his way. That even though we don't have wooden golf clubs today, that I do think that the whipping or the traditional parts of the game is very important. That's why I chose to be a member of your fine society here, and how I got to meet Bern.
Yeah, Ron, I'm at your garage door. Can I go to the front door?
Yeah, the front door is open, Bern.
That's what they all say, brother. Okay, You're right there. That I would just kind of hang out in the kitchen.
I think there's a burglar in your garage, Ron. Be careful.
Well, you better come in because it's a little cold out there to stand outside. Some of you may have seen my workmanship where I got to have my own business. So, all right, Bern, you're back?
Yeah, so I am. I'm sitting in your living room. We
Okay.
can't be in the same room. It's a treat to be in your home in your presence again, Ron. Thanks.
And it's, again, something in my living room that is cherished and will always be one of those memories that I gave something to him, he gave something back, just like Arnie and the driver and stuff. The game of golf and what it can really do for relationships and friendships.
Ron, you've been exceptionally intimate with us today, and we all appreciate it. Those stories that you will never hear in another place. It's pretty cool that I'm in your living room going after that 97-year-old trophy that he presented you with.
Yeah.
But
well, you knew where to find it, right?
Well, not only did the story stick with me, but so did the location of that. And I just wanted to tell you, Ron, you'll be interested in this. I went to the wrong house when I got to your house.
Well, you didn't get shot, so that's good. And the police didn't come and drag you. Nice neighborhood.
So anyway, it'll never be the same again.
Oh yeah, stories again.
I'm wondering if there are any questions out there. And so, Ron, I have what might be my final question. Since I'm in your living room, is there beer in the refrigerator? We can't thank you enough. We look forward to more of this, be it in Latrobe, be it in Indianapolis, or getting together at one of our other events. So, the round of applause for Ron Lucas. Everybody's clapping at home. And I'm clapping down in your living room, brother.
Well, thank you for having me and being patient. We had a little technology that had to get figured out. Bob, you took care of that. And I thank you. I don't know what happened from our trial run this morning to this evening, but that's okay. You got it worked out and it worked.
So it was a great time. Thank you, Ron.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to introduce a little bit of the memories of Latrobe Country Club.